talk about an adrenaline-fueled thrill ride. We're going to get into one right now. That adrenaline-fueled thrill ride that I'm talking about is 1996's The Rock, directed by Michael Bay. This movie had a budget of $75 million, and it was released on June 7th of 96. I saw this in the theaters when it came out, actually opening weekend. The movie actually ended up making 134 in the US and 335 worldwide. So this was a big hit for Michael Bay, coming off of Bad Boys, which was also a hit. And this is what propelled him into doing Armageddon next, and then he did Pearl Harbor, Bad Boys 2, The Island, and Transformers, and blah, blah, blah. This is basically the movie that solidified Michael Bay to what he is today. Although I will say in this movie, he still, I mean, all the Michael Bayisms are there, but they were still new at the time. But he was a little bit more reserved in this film compared to some of the indulgences that he did later on, like in Bad Boys 2 and some of the other films. I like those movies, but Michael Bay can be very indulgent, self-indulgent about some things. So he was still getting his feet wet, but this movie, I think, in my opinion, I'm going to say this up front, is Michael Bay's masterpiece. And I know that sounds like horseshit, but I do believe it is. Till this day, it's my favorite film. I mean, he's done other films I really like. I like Bad Boys 1 and 2. I like Armageddon. I like the battle scenes in Pearl Harbor, although the love story is horseshit. I like the Transformers movies, some of them, not all of them. And I like 13 Hours and Pain and Gain, blah, blah, blah. But to me, this is his best film. Once again, this saw Michael Bay teaming up with Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson. Unfortunately, during production, Don Simpson passed away. So you'll notice at the end of the film, if you've ever watched it or watch it again or watch it for your first time, it says, "In loving memory of Don Simpson." Now, in this movie, the cast is unbelievable. First of all, you got Sean Connery coming in as John Mason. You got Nicolas Cage as Stanley Goodspeed. You got the great Ed Harris as General Hummel. You got David Morse in there, who's a great character actor as Major Baxter. You got William Forsythe in there, who's always great. He always gives it his all. Michael Biehn's in this movie. John C. McGinley and Tony Todd, and there's others. I can go on and on about the cast. The cast is fantastic. Now, doing a little research about this film, some of the stuff I've known for years, but some of it I didn't know. Sean Connery didn't want to travel. They actually shot on Alcatraz Island, and Sean Connery did not want to travel by boat every morning to go out there. So he talked the producers into building him a cabin on the island so he didn't have to travel back and forth, which they did and built him a cabin. So he actually spent time on the island and didn't travel back and forth every day. The premiere of the movie was actually held in the workout yard for the prisoners on the island. I remember that because on the Criterion edition of this movie that was released on DVD, there's actually a little extra on there about how they put a screen up and seating, and they had a premiere on Alcatraz Island, which was actually really cool for them to do something like that. And that is about it. And Hans Zimmer also did the score, which is it's a really good, effective score as well. But let's get into the movie a little bit. In the beginning of the movie, we're introduced to General Hummel, who is kind of talking to his wife. She's passed away. He's just kind of talking to her about how he feels like he has to do something, that he can't let the things that have been going on stand, and he wants to make a change. And he leaves a Medal of Honor tag on her tombstone, kisses it, and then we cut to he's doing an inspection at this military facility, him and his team. And they take over the facility and steal a bunch of rockets armed with VX poison gas. And during this scene, which they set up the threat of this gas, one of his team is in this vault where the gas is, and they drop one of the rockets, and one of these little pearl configuration things drops on the floor and cracks open. They lock the guy in, and his skin starts melting off. So they set up the threat early on in the movie. And then we're introduced to Stanley Goodspeed, played by Nicolas Cage, who's kind of like this nerdy guy. He's a chemical weapons specialist for the FBI. And they show him in his office, and him and his partner are just kind of dicking around, making jokes, and kind of bored. Like, they're not really doing much. And then this package comes in, and they have to put in this chamber because it was sent from, they think, from terrorists. And they open it up, and there's this doll that his partner was monkeying around with, and it has this gas in it and C4 in it. And Nicolas Cage has to defuse it before it blows up the office and kills everybody, which he does, obviously, or the movie will be over. But it's a nice, tense scene, although you know he's not going to die, or it's too early in the movie. But it's a well-shot scene, and it's suspenseful. They're introduced to him and his girlfriend at home, his home life, and she tells him, like, he makes this monologue about how he can't, with what he's seen since he's been at the FBI, he doesn't realize why anybody would want to bring in a baby into this world. And that's when she drops him the news that she's pregnant, which he is very surprised, and they're not married. And he promises her, I'll marry you, and they have like this romantic thing. And then we cut back to General Hummel, and him and his team and these other Marines take over Alcatraz. And there's a tour, 81 tourists are there, they put him in the prison cells, and he calls the FBI director and says, look, I have 81 hostages, I have rockets armed with VX poison gas, I want this amount of money, and if you don't give it to me by this time, I'm going to send them in the heart of San Francisco, and you're going to reap the whirlwind. His thing is he wants to repay under his various commands in Vietnam and in Desert Storm. Some of his guys got left behind, and the government kind of pissed on their memory by not giving the families any benefits or even giving these guys got a proper military burial, and he's pissed off about it. He wants the government to take their heads out of their ass, pretty much. So in one hand, the villain, which is Ed Harris, he's a bad guy, but there's more to him than just being a mustache-twirling bad guy. He's doing it for what he thinks is right, even though it's insane that you're threatening to kill a bunch of people in the city to get it, but that's the avenue he decided to take. Not the most healthy way to deal with this situation, but that's what he decides. And Stanley gets a call, and he has to go to San Francisco. He thinks it's just a training exercise, so he tells his girlfriend, why don't you meet me in San Francisco? I'm sure it's just a training exercise. And he tells her, I'm going to marry you, and I didn't plan on this, but everything will be fine. And they find out that they want to send a SEAL team. This is when we're introduced to Michael Bihn's character. He's a SEAL commander of a team of SEALs, and they want to send them in to take back the island and free the hostages. And the only way to get into the island is from the tunnels underneath, so that way they don't know they're coming. They can surprise them. Well, nobody has any first-hand knowledge of the tunnel system in Alcatraz. The warden's dead. The guards that are still alive don't know anything. But the FBI director and this other gentleman have a conversation about a gentleman who does know the tunnel system because he broke out successfully, and that is John Mason, Sean Connery's character. And Sean Connery's character in this movie is almost like a grittier version of James Bond that got caught by the Americans because he stole secrets and he wouldn't tell them about it, so they kept him in prison for 30 years and didn't give him a trial. So this is where we meet Sean Connery, long hair, beard, and he's been in prison for 30 years. And there's a cool interrogation scene with William Forsythe and Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage. And then he said, I'll help, but you gotta give me a suite at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco. So they agree to give him 2 hours. And he breaks away and gets out, and there's a cool car chase through the streets of San Francisco. And of course, Sean Connery's in a Humvee, Stanley Goodspeed's in a freaking Ferrari. It's a Michael Bay film, might as well go all in, right? And it's a really good, effective car chase. It goes on for a pretty nice amount of time too, and then finally the SEALs, Nicolas Cage finds out that he has to go out there because he has to disarm the rockets. He thought he was going to train one of the SEALs to do it, and they're like, no, you're going. And he's like, and they're like making jokes like, have you even touched a gun since the academy? Like, he hasn't been in the field really. He's a chemical weapons specialist, but he hasn't been out doing actual field work. So they all go. Sean Connery goes, Nicolas Cage goes to get out to the island. And when they get underneath the washroom, the SEALs go up, but General Hummel and his team know they're there, and they ambush them. And all the SEALs end up getting killed, although Hummel didn't want to kill them, but some rocks fell and people just started shooting, and in the crossfire, all the SEALs got killed, except for Goodspeed and Sean Connery's character. They were still down in the tunnels. And Sean Connery's character, and Nicolas Cage talks to him and say, look, I can save everybody, but I have to get to these rockets and disarm them. All I gotta do is take this chip out, and they'll go right into the ocean when they try to fire them. So Sean Connery reluctantly agrees, and we get different action scenes in that, and as it gets closer to time being out, I mean, the dialogue between Cage and Connery is great. Their banter back and forth is hilarious. Connery kind of makes fun of Cage because he's not what he thought he was, so he gives him shit about not, tells him about, you got to be prepared to kill and you can't hesitate. and they're really good together. And Ed Harris is really good as the general, and he's not, like I said, he's not a mustache twirling bad guy. He actually has some more meaning behind him. I mean, besides the surface level stuff, they don't really go into it too much because this is an R-rated action picture, and they got to keep the movie going. But even though he's going about it the wrong way, his reasoning for doing it is kind of noble. And as time runs out, some of the other Marines that they brought in, like Tony Todd's character and this other gentleman, they really want to fire the rockets so they get to some freaking money when they realize that the government's not going to pay. And General Hummel's like, I'm not ready to kill all these people. So there's a mutiny. He gets killed, and there's one rocket left, and the guys are trying to launch it, and Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery end up saving the day. And that's pretty much the movie, but I'm skipping over a lot of stuff. There's a lot of action in this movie. When the action happens, it's R-rated, it's hard-hitting, it's bloody. There's a lot of curse words, man. Nicolas Cage, though, made a cool little thing. During the whole movie, he didn't curse until the end. If you ever watch this movie, he doesn't say one curse word till the end of the movie. He tries to avoid cursing. And at the end of the movie, when he has a hand-to-hand fight with this guy over this last rocket, this last chip, he ends up telling him, like, go eat that, you fuck, when he puts the thing in his mouth and smashes it. But this movie is really well done. Like I said, I believe this is Michael Bay's masterpiece. And I know it sounds like hyperbole, but I like a bunch of Michael Bay films, but this is definitely my favorite. Ever since I've seen it back in June of 1996, I've loved this movie. And I watch it at least once or twice a year. I went on record, I've said this before, I think it's the best action movie of the 90s. I mean, there's some good action films in the 90s, but I think this one's the best one. I would rate this movie a 9.5 out of 10. I love this movie. And yes, there's some plot holes for sure. But with the way the actors handle the material, you can forgive it because they're invested and they're in on it, and they never wink at the camera. Nobody's chewing the scenery. It's all well done, and that's it for me. 9.5 out of 10 for The Rock. I highly recommend if you've never seen it. If you have seen it, what are your thoughts? Tell me down below. What's your favorite Michael Bay film? Do you like Michael Bay, or you're hot and cold on him? Some movies you like, some movies you don't. That's completely understandable. I get it. Hit the thumbs up button if you don't mind. Hit the subscribe button. And I will be back soon with another review. Thanks. Have a great day.